Welcome back to the Love Your 9 to 5 show, episode number 10.
Caution, you will begin to love your 9 to 5 with this show. Join us as we explore and discover your unique strengths and learn to apply them to your daily business activities with your host, Shmuel Septimus.
Before we get started today, I just wanted to take a moment to thank all of you for your tremendous support in this journey all the way up through episode number 10. I am glad to hear that you've been enjoying it, and I'm sure you will enjoy today's episode. Here we go. Welcome to this next episode of the Love Your 9 to 5 show. I am excited to introduce today's guest. Today's guest comes from Sydney, Australia. She is a career coach and a career consultant. And Robyn Greaves, welcome so much to the show. Thank you so much for taking some time and joining us today. How are you doing, Robyn?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure, and the honor is all mine. As we spoke, what we'd like to accomplish today is that I know from our previous conversation, we're both excited by the concept of what you refer to as the third chapter of employees who have achieved a level of success in their professional careers and are looking for something that better suits their unique strengths, talents, and, so to speak, superpowers. And from what I understand is that you help people discover, identify, and apply these skills and talents to their unique professional settings and environments. So for the listener who is trying to figure out what it is on their end that is their unique superpower, what would be the very first step that they would need to do?
I think that's a very good question. And I think people do, as you say, really get to a stage. A typical person that I work with is somebody who's been successful, probably has been working for a decade or more, and for whatever reason has got to a stage in their career where they really want to unpack and repack for the next stage of their career journey. And I guess the first step is to recognise that and to I hold the intention that it is possible to find work that is energising and aligned and enjoyable. I think a lot of people, don't necessarily believe that that's the case. And while we all have to meet the market and we all have to earn a living, it is possible to really find something that really is resonant. So being open to thinking differently, being open to finding something that really is more enlivening, or to reorganise your work in a way. Sometimes I find that it's not necessarily changing your work, but actually getting in touch with all of the things that are really energising and important for you at that stage of your life. And it does change as we go through life. Sometimes it's adding in something. Sometimes it's bringing to life or working in a part of your profession, or even something outside of your professional world that is energising something, bringing something back in, working differently, or sometimes it is a major transition.
Mm-hmm.
I find that for some people, the idea of a plan B and actually working on something as a bit of a side project is also something that can really, for some people, bring new energy and the chance to try something without completely changing everything. So that is also something that I would,
Okay.
I would think about working towards. But yes, yes. Does that answer your question?
It does. And but that's quite a bit, and I would like to kind of unpack some of the things.
Sure.
I've been writing away as you're speaking. So first thing is you mentioned is that some of the people that you consult with have a preconceived notion that work is not supposed to be enjoyable, and it's sort of like something we're forced to accept upon ourselves, that we have to be able to provide for ourselves and our families. So this is a price that we have to pay. And something that you're teaching them is, work can, and I think work should be enjoyable, because if it's not, that means something's not in sync. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think sometimes it's like that boiled frog idea. You know, you could have been working in an organisation and it has really worked for you, and then something happens. As I say, it might be something internal, it may be a leadership change, it might be a change in the business, but it becomes out of alignment. So that idea of keeping an eye on it and being prepared to unpack and repack at different stages of your life journey, you know, recognizing that things may have been fabulous,
Hmm.
but they now, for whatever reason, aren't working anymore, and that's part of life. It's part of, you know, that's realistic. Um,
Why do you think that people begin to look? In other words, many of the people, apparently, the people that come to you and they approach you for assistance, they've been doing okay, and some of them perhaps have been very successful at what they were doing, but now they feel like the need to look for the next stage. What is pushing them? What's motivating them to look for this and to reach out to you or others that they may reach out to?
Well, sometimes it's an external change. So, you know, the world of work is changing significantly. There are people for whom their work is disappearing or has been offshored, so it's no
Okay.
longer available. Sometimes it's an aspirational thing that you want to actually progress or move into a different, you know, a different stage of career or a different type of work. And how do you actually get there? So for some people, it's recognizing a gap or you know, a how. For some people, I mean, we're multifaceted beings. So the idea that you just do the one thing for your whole career life is probably flawed for most people. So for some people, it's, you know, I've got something else I want to do or another part of me that I want to explore or give or expand into. And how do I do that? Um, and what is getting clarity around it. So there's
Hmm.
a part of it is getting clarity around it, and part of it is how do I actually get from here to there.
Got it.
And there, yeah, that's right. And there is a skill set in that transition. I think that's another thing that, you know, is a bit of a message that there is a skill in transitioning. So you wouldn't expect to start playing golf or tennis. It's not in without, you know, without someone, without getting doing some reading, some thinking, and getting some instruction. It's not an innate thing to be able to transition or get a job or, you know, to do that well. It's a skill set. So how to actually do that effectively.
How reassuring is that? Because anyone who's in a position who's trying to transition into something else, in addition to the challenge of trying to identify exactly what is it that is the right line of work or the right business for them to start or right profession for them to engage in, that actual process itself needs some sort of guidance, and without reaching out to anyone for assistance, that I'm sure multiplies the pain, or it makes the challenge that much greater without knowing that. That is a fascinating look at the actual process. Why, well, not the goal is not just to get to the next step, the actual transition itself. I love that.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Yes.
That's such a great insight. Now you mentioned before, um, sometimes for some people, a plan B or some sort of side project might be appropriate. And I guess this goes into what you just mentioned about the skill of transitioning. That if someone's something that they in a position or a company, a business that they feel like they're out of sync or their job is disappearing or there's some sort of personal or internal conflict that is pushing them in the direction of a career transition, sometimes you can't just flip a switch and one day the person's an accountant, the next day they're a lawyer, or one day they're in this department with these responsibilities, the next day everything is shifted. So can you tell us a little bit more of how someone may go about doing that, or maybe even a specific example of either yourself or someone else who has done so successfully?
Sure, sure. I know somebody that I know well. I didn't actually work with this person, but I an example of somebody that I know who did that very successfully. So they actually had a government career, really successful career.
Hmm.
Just at that stage, where really wanting to explore other opportunities. This person actually, as well as their core skill set, which was, as I say, government IT
Okay.
senior um, senior work, was very interested in mediation. and working in that space. So he, while he was still working, actually trained as a mediator. So there's a skill set, of course, involved in accreditation, and was able to do that sort of work. I think voluntarily originally, but got involved in that work in different ways. He has actually transitioned to a portfolio, so he's been able to. I think he also upskilled a bit in his original career to be a bit more how-to and a bit less of a leader of people. But he has negotiated a couple of government contracts actually, so he's still working in the work that he was originally trained for, but also is working a couple of days a week now for a not-for-profit mediation agency. So really feeling that he's bringing that, that work and that work is fantastic for him. Actually gives him also a lot of community and a lot of the other things that he gets from work, in terms of connection with people and so forth. But is also working in his original professional area and topping up the income from both of those, of course, because one of those areas is not very well paid, and the other is able to be paid on a good daily rate. So it's helped him to balance out the work that he's doing. And I saw him recently, and he said to me, this is a guy who's late career now, who would be in his 60s, and he said to me, "This is the best chapter of my career ever. I'm absolutely having a ball, and I'm not intending to finish work. I'm not, I'm not intending to stop work anytime soon." And he looks fabulous. If I'm telling you how old he is, but he could be a decade younger. But that's really working for him.
I hope he listens to this.
I guess the message is also to think outside the square. A lot of people think, "Oh, I haven't, my work's disappeared, or I'm not having. I'll have to get another job, or I'll look on, one of the job boards." Well, actually, you can create something for yourself that really works.
Right, but the problem is that takes work and that takes the skill of transitioning, because people say, "Well, what should I do? Right now I'm doing this profession and it's not working for me, and I don't want to do that other profession." So it's either A, B, or C. And what you're saying is so true, that you may have to create an original an original smorgasbord, or an original assortment of positions, jobs, businesses, something that you can get all your needs met, be it financial, be it personal gratification, self-expression, sense of community. Everything that a person needs to get from their professional environment may not all come from one particular job or one particular role. You may have to spread out a little bit. And it seems like from your friend's case that it seems like he's not looking to go anywhere. Like he's started transitioning and kind of permanently parked in that position. Is right? Is
yes.
that how it is? Excellent.
Well, yes, I think that at the moment that's really working for him, and he's getting his needs really met in that way. I think for some people it is a professional realignment, and they not everybody it's a portfolio. That's just one example. I've worked with people who who even want there's an opportunity within their organisation to step up. They've been doing what they've been doing for quite a long time, and there may be some reskilling in that. So for example, if you're stepping up into a leadership position, or you want to, you might need to make yourself more visible. There might be some particular skills that aren't again innate, that you need to learn, to actually more leadership skills or leading leaders or whatever it is. But there may be some skill set to develop, and some new connections within your profession and within the organisation in which you're working, so that you can actually move within that world. Sometimes there are people that I have worked with who their jobs have actually disappeared. I mean, that is the way of the evolving world of work at the moment. So sometimes, you actually have to it's out of no, it's the way that it is. But within that reorganising, you can really find something that does really work for you.
Right. I mean, many times when the jobs disappear, they're replaced with other jobs, which sometimes require the same skill set, sometimes not. But I like how you call it a realignment, and kind of finding another application for their skills.
That's right. That's right. So I've started working with somebody works in supply chain, for example. A lot of that work is going to disappear in the next, 5 years, maybe a bit longer than that. I would say about the next 5 years with artificial intelligence. People know that. So saying, okay, that's what I've been working in, but it's going to radically change. So I need to be ahead of the game. I need to be thinking about what I'm going to do as a next step. And it does take time to make a big transition like that. Like you ideally start building out your network for the next stage of your journey, and in doing that, find out what opportunities there are, have conversations with people, start to plan for that, so that you don't turn around one day and find that that the world shifted and that you haven't moved with it. So I think there's also that component in the work that I do, and that is, again, that's the reality of the world.
Right.
So keeping an eye on that. What are the waves? What are the evolving trends? What's happening in the world, and how can I actually add value to that? And how can I ride those waves and find a place for myself within that?
You mentioned about starting early, and this is something which we see is, again, maybe in Australia is different, but for sure in the United States, the understood way of thinking is that you go to college, you get a degree in something, and hopefully it'll be something that can earn you, that will allow you to be successful professionally. But then the goal is to specialize, because if you're a doctor, there are many other doctors. If you're an attorney, there are many other attorneys. But you're going to be a tax attorney for a specific type of corporation doing business in a certain particular type of way. So then you're needed. Now, there's truth to that. In any type of profession, by specializing, that creates your need. But the second no one needs that specialty anymore, or if there's sufficient, if there are other people and supply and demand, so then that person can be up the creek without a paddle, so to speak. So by what you're saying is starting early is if we don't have to limit ourselves, hone in so specifically. And first of all, nobody is that way. We're complex human beings, and we have so many different aspects. Nobody on birth, the nurse didn't say you will be, a cardiac surgeon, pediatric, something very specific. Where human beings were much more complex than that. So what you're saying is really useful, and it's very counterintuitive to what we're used to thinking, is that we might have any particular position, but we should be constantly growing all the parts of ourselves. I could tell you philosophically why I think that's correct, but even just from a business perspective, because you never know, we're within your organization, that might be necessary, and that might be your next promotion step up. You might see a business opportunity to start your own, or like you're saying, industries come and go. Things which have been around for a very long time, they may disappear, and then your specialty might be useless unless you've been using it, and applying it more broadly.
That's right. That's right. And I mean, I think part of the message of in my idea of the third chapter encapsulates this, that, I mean, people are also living longer, and there is therefore with that great opportunity to, to live into other parts of yourself, to provided you're healthy and well, and that you've kept yourself current, or that you can develop that currency. I mean, it just takes more time if you haven't kept your eye out and got going earlier. But it's still possible to come back, I think, from any place, really.
Absolutely.
But people have an opportunity to really, live into themselves, and to work and have really a whole other chapter of work and life that wasn't available to them only a decade or two ago. So people are not retiring at 60 or 65 and living only a few more years after that. There are many people, like my example of my friend with the portfolio, who the possibilities are endless. And one of the things about having been successful and having that early career and developing skill set and having some having established yourself a bit in the world, is that many people have got great flexibility then to be able to say, well, you know what, I'm really going to find something else that's going to be really a great trajectory for me, and the opportunity to give back, and the opportunity to create something that really is who I am and resonant with the person that I am. So if you get to 50 and you've been successful in your career and you say, you know what, this is Project Me, I really want to bring the parts of myself to the world and to work, whatever that is for you. That might be a next step up role that you really love to do, and you're free of some of the responsibilities of family and running kids to school that you had a decade earlier. Or it might be a portfolio, or it might be whatever it is. But whatever it is for you, it's very possible to live into that and to create something that actually is a great next step in that latter phase of career. But I think that is, a brand new opportunity for many people that was not there. And in many ways, the connected world is giving us great chance to do that too.
Like us meeting together right now.
Like us meeting together right now. That's it. Yeah.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with the book The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss.
Yes, I am.
Oh, you are? Okay, awesome. So I absolutely love that book. And the concept that, I don't want to work for only 4 hours. I want to be productive every single moment that I'm up, and that I wouldn't want it any other way. But the concept is that, to create your own passive income in a way that you get to choose how to spend your time is phenomenal. But specifically to what you just mentioned, the concept of retiring at 65. I'm a nursing home administrator. I've been working with the seniors for a number of years. Retirement is not necessarily a good thing. Even if you go to assisted livings, again, I'm not sure if it works the same way in Australia, but it's people downsize, they sell their house, sell their apartment, they move into these luxurious accommodations. The average stay in some of these assisted livings can be 2 years. Now, you would think people move in there and they're there forever. It's not a natural way of being on vacation every single day and just enjoyment. It doesn't work. And when I went to the first time when I walked into such a facility and I heard those numbers, it blew me over. But the concept is, you don't want to retire at 65 if you enjoy what you're doing. You want to do it until you can no longer do it. The only reason why I'm far away from 65. Maybe it's easier for me to say, but my point is that if you love what you do, then you want to do it forever. You want to keep on doing it because you enjoy this. This is your essence. So
that's right. That's right. And that work is an expression of who we are, and brings many benefits for people. So, but it may be that you have to unpack and repack a bit to get it working in a way that works for who you are now and where you're up to, and what's important. Sometimes I find people continue with the work they're doing, but do it less, and then bring in something paid or even unpaid, or even having more time. But and that's very much a trend in Australia. A lot of organisations are even getting people engaged in their 40s and 50s, long before retirement, and saying, what's it going to look like for you, starting to think about that, and that we have options, that you can, if you want to, you can work 3 days a week, and use your expertise and your specialisation and continue to grow and participate in all of the benefits of that, but have more time and do some of the other things that are important to you, and what might those things be. And I think that keeps people very enlivened and energised too, that you're not, you've got the best of both worlds.
Hold on right there. How does that work? These people, they're working full time. I assume full time is 40 hours a week at least, and then they start working only 3 days a week in their 40s or 50s. What happens to their paychecks?
Well, they earn less money, so they may not start doing that until it works for them. But so, for example, I recently went to my optometrist to get my eyes tested. The guy that tested my eyes, I don't know exactly how old he was, but he was clearly, 60 plus. And he said to me, I've been an optometrist. He was fantastic. He knew exactly what he was doing. I could tell and had total confidence in him from the moment I laid eyes on him. And he said his organisation had engaged him quite early in the conversation. So he planned towards that. But now that he's of that age, he only needs to work, 2 or 3 days a week, and that's giving him time to do the other things that he likes to do, to spend time with his family. He was clearly a fit guy, so he probably had a sporting interest.
Right.
Whatever it is, people have different, but still keeping his work alive as part of that going forward. And I think, and what I said, like organisations, I know of organisations that they're getting people in the conversation in their 40s. They may not move to that until they're in their 50s or 60s, but they're starting to have the conversation and to think differently about how they might craft a new stage of their career.
I think you mentioned this briefly earlier, but do you find that when you're consulting with a client that based on who they are and their experience, that it makes more sense for them to move completely out from being an employee of a company, and instead they have a skill set, they have a knowledge, they have connections in a way that it makes sense for them to go out on their own, either as a consultant or as any other business, that they may be in? Is that sometimes something that you see, and perhaps others who are listening right now, and they're trying to figure out that, we're discussing they should get in touch with, with who they are, and everything we're speaking about is in the perspective of being an employee and working for somebody else. So I guess basically my question is, how do you know, and how does someone define when it's time, or if it's ever time, to go out on their own?
Sure. Well, I think that is an option for many people, and many people find that working for themselves or creating a portfolio of work that involves some part-time work and some working for yourself suits them well. I think if you've been an employee and you haven't worked for yourself, it's important to really do some self reflection and get some insight into what you might need to develop in order to be successful doing that, and to really think it through, because it is a different, it does require a different skill set and a different mindset working for yourself. There are some really good online tools that you can use.
Such as? Do you have any Go ahead.
Yeah, I think any of that Strengths Finders material, that's MIT, the positive psychology, a lot of that's free. You can go online and have a look at that. I personally use a tool called the Berkman, which is it's an American-based tool, but it's been internationally validated and is a fantastic tool for getting insight into some of the personal qualities and ways of working.
What is the name of that last tool?
It's called the Berkman, Birkman. You can have a look on Berkman.com. They have an entry-level one that, if it's free, if it's not free, it's not very, not costly. There's a more sophisticated version that you need to be accredited to utilise. And I have that, I have that accreditation. There are, those people accredited all over the world. Certainly, many people within the US. But just to uncover parts. I really like the Berkman because, as well as about what motivates you and what you're interested in, and getting a lot of personal insight and language to describe that. A lot of people don't have the language to really describe what motivates them or how they like to work. It's not something they've ever sort of engaged in conversation around.
Right.
So it gives you a lot of that sort of insight, but it's also got a lot of occupational data behind it, so that there are things about working for yourself that it's useful to know how you will approach that, because for some people, it doesn't. There are unforeseen aspects of working for themselves that they don't understand until they actually start to find it really hard. So you don't want to make that leap without the self-knowledge and self-insight, so that, and if it's something that that you're not going to be good at, then you can build that into your transition ahead of time. So, an example of that would be whether or not you like to work in teams or individually. Some people find it very hard to actually work on their own. They find it hard to keep motivated. They find it hard to think without having someone to talk to. So, where are you on that spectrum? And again, you may be able to work for yourself and get that need met in other ways, or, you know, find a portfolio that meets your needs across the different activities you're doing. But to know that about yourself is very important. What's your orientation to asking for money? And reward is also an important aspect of that. So, yes, so I would say,
Okay, so
get the
those are
self-insight.
right. I mean, those are definitely very useful tools. It sounds like
Mm.
those might be useful regardless if you're going to go out on your own and start your own business, or if you're going to just get a good idea of who you are. Is that right? Wouldn't it work both ways?
Absolutely.
It would.
Absolutely. And I think anything you can do on the personal development front to get more self-insight is always a useful thing for, career transition, for lots of reasons, but for career transition.
Mm-hmm.
So that you really, as I say, there's a language to talking about those things too that you pick up um, from reading and engaging in those sort of self-assessments, and that's really important so that you do get that insight, and that you don't, you minimise then the mistake. And if you do go forward, you, with that self-insight, you can plan for the things that you might find more difficult ahead of
Excellent.
time, rather than encountering them from a place of not awareness.
Excellent. I really appreciate everything that you've shared today. Before we wrap up, is if there's one particular activity that a listener right now can do as soon as they're finished with this episode, something that they can do to get one step closer to finding and defining their unique strengths, powers, talents. I know you mentioned those three tools, and they can definitely use those assessments to be able to understand it better. But is there any other exercise that you would recommend someone in that position to engage in?
I think it's quite useful to look at what you've been doing, your achievements. It's quite good to write down, two or three things that you consider to be your greatest achievements, things that are not necessarily work related, and then really have a look at those. Like, who were you with? What were you doing? Was it as a group or individually? What were the skills you were using? That often gives you insight into, what you like to do and what's really important. You may have some people that you've worked with who know you well that you can ask as well. So get a few conversations going about, what do you think are my strengths? Ask people, engage people. And I also think, and we haven't really touched so much on this part of the transition journey, but there's something very important about tapping into your own intuition and your own inner knowing. And I encourage people to, to journal, to spend a bit of time just on your own in that sort of place, whatever you do to get in that place of, some people meditate or just get into that creative kind of space where you're tapping a bit of that side of yourself. Do a bit of, even every morning, get up and journal, and just see what's there. Get
Let me
tapped
just
into
cut
your
in
own
right there
voice.
for a moment,
Yeah.
because this is something that we did not discuss at all, and
No.
I'm a little bit fascinated by this. So, can you explain just briefly what does that mean, intuition, and how does and what do you mean by journaling? Just step by step. What exactly does that mean?
Sure. Well, I think when I say intuition, that as well as analytical knowing, we also there's a lot of just that's where it's like being creative. Where does that come from?
Mm-hmm.
When I create something, when I sit down and write or draw or have a new idea.
So it's like a sixth sense.
It's in that realm. So I think
Okay.
there's a lot in that realm that we often in the busyness of life don't tap into. And sometimes I find if people spend a bit of time, it might be having a walk in nature and then doing a bit of writing, or it might be just including a little bit of that sort of. So when I say journaling, writing, drawing, just sitting with yourself and tapping into whatever comes.
You think expressing our natural creativity.
Yeah, that's right. And sometimes people find that there is a lot of knowing right there if they pause for a moment and let that come through. So there is an element of, in any transition, I think whatever the transition is, and we make many transitions in life. If you actually journal, as in write, draw, or whatever it is so get a book, get a nice looking book, I would say, one that you feel good picking up and writing in, and then sit and spend a little bit of time. Might be 10 minutes a day. It might be that you walk on the weekends. You have a bit of a bushwalk on the weekends, and then you sit under a tree and spend an hour with yourself a week, and just write in that journal. Maybe it's draw if you don't like writing or whatever, and just doodle away to yourself and just sort of see, because sometimes there's a lot of untapped knowing right there. So spending time with yourself as well.
You're saying there's no one who really knows ourselves better than ourselves if we allow ourselves the chance to get to know ourselves. I know I said the word ourselves a lot of times, but I think that's true.
Yeah, absolutely.
We just don't. We don't usually focus on that. Okay, so
no,
that is I think you've shared with us 3 very practical, applicable exercises we can engage in right away, and that is reviewing our achievements, even not related to work, and defining which specific skills were used. The second one you mentioned is asking friends, associates, anyone within your social circle what they perceive as your biggest strengths. And this third one is focusing on our own intuition and that own inner self, and that can only happen with reflection. Now, I know you mentioned an hour is a lot of time, but I'm just thinking on perhaps a more practical level. Not that what you're saying is not practical, but you could do that in the shower. You could do it on the commute home.
Absolutely.
I once heard that people, when they get into the car or when they ever get into a place where they're going to be there for a while, most people right away they'll turn on the radio, they'll listen to something, even if it's something educational. But it's very, very uncomfortable to sit in a car, in an hour commute and have nothing on, because that there's only one person that we can meet, and that's ourselves. Or put another way, the last person we would want to meet in a dark alley is ourselves, because confronting ourselves sometimes is a challenge. Now, before we wrap up, if there's one book that you would recommend that can help us get more in touch, perhaps with this concept of intuition, or even not, just with being able to get in touch with who we are and figuring out ways to apply this to our personal and professional settings, is there one particular book that you would recommend that perhaps has made a significant impact on you as well?
One book. Thinking. You mentioned Tim Ferriss. I really like his work. I think that the 4-hour working week is really metaphorical for putting your focus on what's really important. And I really like that, whether it's 4 hours or 5 hours. But I think that a lot of what is in his work is fantastic.
Okay.
I really like Simon Sinek, to Find Your Why. There's a very how-to version of that that's out at the moment, which is, I think, very useful and very practical. And he's got TED Talks. You can.
So I'm only familiar with the TED Talk. So he has a book also, Find Your Why?
Yeah, Find Your Why. There's a how-to guide, a practical guide that's come out recently that's on the book best seller list here in Australia. And I think there's some very practical how-to in the
okay.
In
I'll
that,
definitely
in that
include
book.
links to all this in the show notes. We'll put links to these books and the other tools that you mentioned as well.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Last point before we let you go. If any of the listeners want to be in touch with you, and if they have any questions, what would be the best way for them to learn all about you, your services, and to be in touch with you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, and that's how we connected. So LinkedIn, and also I do have a website, thethirdchapter.com, 3RD, THE 3RD chapter.com, and so you can find out all about me by having a look there.
Okay, excellent. I know I had a look there, and I'm still learning more from that website as well. Thank you so much, Robyn, for sharing some of your experience, your talent, and with the listeners today, it's packed with lots of applicable and practical how-to information, as well as some very interesting and unique background information, getting into the more creative, fuzzy side of ourselves as well, which some of us, shrunk away from. But I really appreciate your time with us today. Thank you so much, and I really wish you the best of luck in all of your endeavors.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I wish you the very best too. I think it's a fabulous project that you're working on.
I'm so grateful to Robyn for sharing her experiences with us. And in case you missed anything, you can find it all in the show notes at shmuelseptimus.com/10. Again, that's shmuelseptimus.com/10. I'd like to give a quick shout out to those who have reached out to me with their feedback. I really, really appreciate it. I can be reached via email at shmuel@shmuelseptimus.com. I do respond to every email that comes in. You can also find me on LinkedIn by searching for my name in the search box. As always, if you have enjoyed this episode, please head over to iTunes and leave us a nice review. You can go directly there by shmuelseptimus.com/iTunes. This will help iTunes share this show with others who are interested in this show. Till next time, learn to apply the tips that you've learned from this episode and bring your professional career a little more in sync with your unique superpowers.